Hi, I'm Bob,
And I'm Sherry.
and this is Mostly Politics with Bob and Sherry.
And today we're interviewing Jake Roberts. He is the candidate for State Senate District 38. As you can see, we're not in studio today, so Bob and I are not looking our best, but we're looking forward to interview Jake. Good morning, Jake.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me.
So, Jake, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you go to school? And what motivated you to become a public defender?
Yeah, so my name's Jake Roberts. I am a lifelong resident of the North Hills. I'm the father of 3 young children. I have a 5-year-old son, a 3-year-old daughter, and a daughter who just turned 6 months old.
Aw.
I'm actually the one of the coaches on my son's t-ball team this year, so got my hands full. And as far as my education goes, I went to Villanova University straight out of high school, right after I graduated high school, graduated in 2013. From there, I went straight into law school at the University of Pittsburgh. So I've pretty much covered the entire state through my education, 4 years on the east side, and then law school back home at Pittsburgh. Once I graduated law school, I took a job as an assistant public defender in Allegheny County. So I did that for a little over 3 years. After 3 years in Pittsburgh's public defender's office, I was offered an appointment as the chief public defender in Clarion County, which I accepted. So I have actually been the head of that county office in Clarion for a little over 2 years now. It's a long drive, which is not the most pleasant, with gas prices being what they are.
That's what I just want to say about the gas price.
Yeah, they're killing me right now at the pumps. So that's something that hopefully we can address once I'm in Harrisburg next year. But as far as why I decided to become a public defender, I think there's a reputation or a saying that there's really no better experience, courtroom experience for a young attorney than in a public defender's office. So I get to see the courtroom, the inside of the courtroom every week. I get to see something different every single week. I'm never doing the same thing. I'm getting all kinds of cases, and I'm constantly kept on my feet. My skills are kept sharp as a litigator, as an attorney, as a public speaker. But beyond the experience aspect of it, I've always been a strong proponent of the Constitution, and for everybody that's charged with a crime, guilty, innocent, or otherwise, I truly believe that they have a constitutional right to due process under the law. And if the state is upholding their end of a prosecution, then the bad guys still go to jail, regardless of what I do as a defense attorney. But I think every individual should have their rights and their liberties protected based on a constitutional basis. So that's kind of why I got into public defense, in addition to the great experience that it provides as a litigator.
Jay, can you kind of tell us what a day's like? What are some of the things you do as a public defender, and what are some of your accomplishments you're most proud of?
Sure. Every day's different. So, Monday, I might spend the entire day over at the county jail doing jail visits. Tuesday, I might be, in jury selection, picking a jury trial for any number of a type of cases. We do every criminal charge that you can imagine: DUIs, drug cases, assault, robberies, everything. So I see something new every day, every week. And Wednesday, because I run, a county office, I might be meeting with the commissioners, figuring out how to negotiate and then balance my office's budget. So, like I mentioned before, it really is great experience for a young attorney like myself. And I think, that is something that I'm proud of is, after just 3 years as an attorney, as an assistant public defender, I was offered this appointment to run an entire public defender's office up in Clarion. So that is something that I'm proud of. In addition to the fact that I do have the opportunity to protect individuals' civil liberties and their constitutional rights on a daily basis. And I think I do that to the best of my ability every single day. So that's also something that I'm proud of.
And Jake, what motivated you to run for state senate position?
First and foremost, it's for my kids. Like I said, I'm the father to 3 young children. My oldest is getting ready to start kindergarten this coming school year. And, on a daily basis, it's sad to say, but I feel as though I'm witnessing the world crumbling all around them. And, we have really bad leadership here in Pennsylvania as things currently stand between the governor and the lieutenant governor and the attorney general. We have a bunch of people that are allowing Pennsylvanians' rights and freedoms to be stripped away to next to nothing. And so I don't want my kids to go to school feeling like they're not getting an adequate education, that they're not being prepared to be, contributing members of society, that they're instead just being indoctrinated into, liberal activists. We have this runaway inflation that we're dealing with now. Pennsylvania is a state that's particularly bad with the bureaucratic red tape, driving business out, driving our population numbers out. And instead of just, sitting behind a computer screen and complaining about these things on Twitter or Facebook, I decided that, a true conservative voice needed to enter this state Senate race. It's a purple district, and it's not something that should just be handed to the Democrats. So I viewed it more or less as my duty to enter this race. I'm not a career politician by any means, so it's not something that I was chomping at the bit to do. But now that I've done it, now that I've jumped in, I'm happy that I did so, and I'm hoping to, take the momentum that we've built up and take this all the way to Harrisburg and enact meaningful change.
Jake, you're saying that you don't want to hand the position to the Democrat, but you are currently challenging a Republican state representative, and so why wouldn't you just support your party candidate? Why are you challenge her? Is there something that you felt that needs to be improved?
Yeah, so like I said before, it wasn't always a given that I was going to enter this race. I met with people from the state Republican Party probably close to a year ago now to talk about it. And at the time, they had indicated that there were a number of interested Republicans for this seat, that this is a toss-up seat, that this is one of the state's most targeted races to take back from the Democrats. So I was in wait-and-see mode for a while to see which Republicans were going to enter this race, and I was more or less hoping that we were going to have a strong conservative slate. In the lead-up to people throwing their names into the rings, I soon came to realize that my primary opponent, Lori Mizgorski from Shaler, she was going to be the only individual on the Republican ticket entering the race. So I did some research into her voting record, into some of the things that she said in the past publicly, media, and I really wasn't impressed with her credentials as a conservative. One of the most glaring, I think, errors in her voting history is failing to vote for legislation that would have made Pennsylvania a constitutional carry state with regards to the Second Amendment. She was one of the only Republicans in the state House to vote against that bill. It's a bill that passed with bipartisan support, and she voted against it as a Republican, which to me is a huge hole in her Republican conservative credentials. But beyond that, she just doesn't seem to stand for a lot of the conservative values that are important to me. I've looked at her website. I've looked at her posts on social media. She certainly, panders for support from the Democrat Party as well as the Republican Party. And, in today's day and age where so many of our problems in this state and nationally can be traced back to weak Republicans or rhino-type Republicans, I really felt as though a strong conservative voice needed to enter this race, and that's why I did so.
you support constitutional carry in Pennsylvania. Is that why you received the endorsement from the Gun Owners of America?
I do think that's a big reason. The Gun Owners of America, they've endorsed me. I'm more than excited to receive that endorsement. They're a great organization. They're a great grassroots group that have thrown their weight and support behind a number of super strong candidates that support the Second Amendment in Pennsylvania. So yes, I do think my stance on constitutional carry went a long way in earning that endorsement. But beyond that, I mean, I'm across. It's not just constitutional carry. I mean, across the board. I was told that I answered the survey that they had me fill out as a candidate, essentially correct on every firearms issue. That's part of the conversation here in Pennsylvania. So the Second Amendment is sacred. You know, it's the Second Amendment to our United States Constitution for a reason, right behind the First Amendment that protects, you know, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. And that goes further than just saying that you have the right to possess a gun to hunt or for self-defense. And I am going to be one of the loudest and strongest voices in support of expanding Second Amendment rights in Pennsylvania. And I think that truly resonated with the leadership over at GOA and helped contribute to them endorsing me.
Jake, you mentioned about the inflation, and Pennsylvania over the years has been losing population, especially young population. What should be done by the state government to grow the Pennsylvania economy and also retain young talents in the state?
Pennsylvania is one of the worst states with regards to bureaucracy, with regards to red tape, unnecessary state agency regulation. And it's things like that that drive up costs, and they really disincentivize business from wanting to operate within the borders of Pennsylvania. I think that's a big part of it, is really looking at what these state agencies are doing, the hoops that they're making businesses jump through in order to operate in Pennsylvania, and then just taking a big pair of scissors and cutting through a lot of that red tape to make business operations a lot more appealable to companies that might want to operate in Pennsylvania. I've spoken with local business owners, and they've told me as much. They've said, you know, I used to make X number of dollars, and because Pennsylvania has forced me to, you know, do these insane audits or go through these, you know, hoops with paperwork and this and that, you know, it's really stuff that's not happening in a lot of surrounding states. So I'm taking my business, I'm taking my operations, and I'm going across the border somewhere else. And that filters down, you know, all the way through our, you know, our market capitalist society, and it's driving business owners and it's driving consumers out of the state and into Ohio. Ohio has been expanding in much the same way that Pennsylvania has been losing population. And there's really no good reason for that. And so we need to take a good hard look at what these state agencies are doing, the paperwork that they're having companies fill out, and we need to, I think, cut through a lot of that. And beyond that, I mean, we're sitting on a gold mine here in Pennsylvania with respect to oil and natural gas. We have, you know, the second, you know, highest oil and gas reserves out of all 50 states. And we're really not tapping into that to the fullest extent and potential that exists. And, you know, as far as growing the economy, I mean, to me, that is the glaring, most shining opportunity that exists, you know, in Pennsylvania's soil. And we need to unrestrict these pipelines. We need to expand oil and gas drilling, and beyond just drilling for it, we really need to pursue opportunities to export our oil and gas reserves. I know there have been conversations in Europe saying, you know, we want to communicate with states like Pennsylvania. We want to reach out to them directly and you know, export, you know, their resources to our countries, specifically with respect to what's going on in Russia and Ukraine right now. There is a need, and with an opportunity like that does exist, you know, it makes all the sense in the world to go after that. So beyond the more broad elimination of the bureaucracy, I think the oil and gas is the clear-cut answer as to how we can expand our economy here in Pennsylvania.
The issue of parental rights sort of started in Loudoun County, Virginia, and it seems to have shifted to Florida with the law that's being called "Don't Say Gay" law. Conservatives look at that and say there are things being taught in schools. We have this is inappropriate for children. We don't want this. And we see now, even in Florida, where they're screening textbooks and actually banning even math textbooks because of the content. And so that kind of seems like not a conservative thing to do, to have the government, banning books like that. But then we see what happened. I think it was in Hempfield Township, where there was a drag show hosted by the GSA group, a student group who's there for equity and inclusion. But the school responded very quickly by firing the teacher who's responsible. I just wonder where do you fall in that whole debate, and what you think Pennsylvania could do or should do at the state level for parental rights?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, with respect to parental rights, I think school choice needs to be enacted in Pennsylvania. We can't continue funding these broken public schools that are failing our students, that are failing their futures. And I truly believe that the tax dollars that we put into our education should follow the students. They should not fund broken institutions. And if that means certain public schools that are not getting the job done need to go by the wayside, that they need to fail, then so be it. But I am a strong believer in school choice, and I think that would be a great first step to addressing the problems. But beyond that, no, like you said, with respect to what's going on in Florida, by no means am I somebody that supports, banning books and censorship. But I think at the same time, the leftists and the Democrats in today's Democrat Party have no reservation in throwing their full weight and agenda into our schools, public, private, and otherwise. They've, I think, spent decades infiltrating school boards, infiltrating teachers' unions, and they have no problem corrupting our children, our youths, and trying to indoctrinate them into being the next generation of far left activists. And so you're not going to win that fight without playing by their terms. And I think with what Ron DeSantis has done in Florida and what the Florida legislature has done has maybe not been the most appealing approach, but I think to a large extent, a lot of it has been necessary in order to fight back on the rot that has infected these schools. With respect to what I would do, I think you need to add a strong element of transparency to these school curricula. The parents have every right to know what's being taught to their kids, what their kids are being exposed to on a daily basis. And I think if the schools want to hide that, or they want to push back and fight against making their curriculum completely open, then we need to ask long and hard questions about why that might be. We need to refocus on the teaching of math, science, reading, and not these values-based lessons of, gender studies or, any talk at all about sexual orientation or gender identity. That has no place whatsoever in the school system at all, in my opinion, but especially to the young kids in the elementary and primary grades. We need to root that out. And yeah, what's going on in Florida, how they want to label it, the Don't Say Gay bill. The word gay doesn't appear in that Florida legislation anywhere. And I think the fact that these Florida Democrats have gone so crazy fighting against what, in my opinion, is a pretty innocent bill that was passed in Florida. All the bill does is say, don't talk to kindergartners, don't talk to first, second, and third graders about gender identity, about sexual orientation. That is a values-based lesson that should be left for the parents to discuss with their children if and when they deem it appropriate. Don't talk about that in schools. And the left has lost their collective minds over that. Putting up billboards all over the state of Florida that just have the word gay on it. It's insane to me. And I think that truly goes to, unmask the modern Democrat Party and shows what they're trying to do in our schools, and we need to root that out. We need to root out the talk about gender identity, the talk about sexual orientation, root out the talk about a person's skin color, this critical race theory that's gone on in our schools. Our kids should not be taught to judge others and to view the world through the lens of race. And so that is going on in our schools. That's going on right here at home in Pennsylvania. in public and private schools alike, and that's something that needs to be legislatively eliminated. And I would be proud to author and sponsor legislation that accomplishes just that.
I believe there's a state law in Pennsylvania now that requires the schools to share their curriculum with parents. But the way it's implemented is the parent has to request a meeting at the school, and then they're allowed to view the curriculum while they're sitting there in the school conference room or whatever, and then they leave. So that's how it's being implemented. They may say that they provide, the curriculum, but that's how they have to do it. Is parents have to go in and be in the school, and they can only look at it while they're there. Is that true? Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that particular legislation, but I don't disbelieve that exists, and I would say that something like that is completely inadequate. I mean, how many parents, if they had the opportunity to pull up a school's curriculum online and see what their kids are being taught, are going to do that, versus how many parents are going to schedule a meeting at the school. You have these school administrators that don't want parents, seeing what's going on in the curriculum. So, who's to say that they're going to, make all these hoops for the parents to jump through just to get a meeting, and then they could potentially limit the location, the time that they have to view that. So, a right that's being, hemmed away as much as legislation like that seems to hem away at a parent's right to observe their children's curriculum really isn't a right at all at that point. And that would be something that if that does exist, that would need to be expanded, tenfold, I think, to be adequate.
So transparency requires it to be easy to access, easy and convenient.
Yeah, I mean, something like that. I don't think there's any legitimate reason why. I mean, if it's a public school and this is what the kids are being taught on a daily basis, like, why should the school, have that hidden behind closed doors? That's something that I don't see any compelling reason why that can't be, uploaded to a website, and if there's a passcode for a parent of that particular, school, if it's a private school or otherwise to access, then so be it. But no, I don't see a reason as to why that would be hidden, in an office somewhere, and you have to schedule an appointment to access something like that.
So, Jake, I want to ask a question about immigration, and because this is a topic that actually puts pressure on the economy and school and impacting some of the poor neighborhoods. As you know, the southern border, it's open, and we are taking in millions of migrants. And these migrants get sent in different parts of the United States. And most of the time, they get sent to the poorest neighborhood. And also some of the children that does not even speak English get to send to the public schools, and the teacher have to really pay special attention to them. The only reason I say that, because one of my friend's daughter is in the North Hill School District, and North Hill School District apparently takes in a lot of migrant children, and they sit in the classroom and they can't speak the language. Now, what do you think about that, and how do you think Pennsylvania should handle when the federal government starts sending migrants that came into this country without documents and putting pressure on the state's economy?
Yeah, and it's a complicated issue. I mean, something like that, I think there's a lot of moving parts and pieces. Obviously, the United States has always been a country that has accepted immigrants. A lot of people refer to the United States as a nation of immigrants, but there's a process. There's a system in place. It's a system that allowed this country to essentially, elevate to being one of the most powerful nations and the most powerful nation in the world. And that was through an immigration system that worked. What we have now does not work. We should not, here in Pennsylvania, we should not be promoting to the nation, to the world, that we are going to open our state's borders to individuals that have a clear disregard for this nation's laws and are going to come over the border illegally. And I think a lot of that traces back, the fact that we have been doing that for some time, traces back to a leadership problem in Harrisburg and a leadership problem in a lot of our cities. Beyond the southern border, we had the the situation that we dealt with in Afghanistan. There was a crisis over there and a humanitarian crisis, and a lot of refugees were fleeing Afghanistan and wanting to come to the United States. And that whole process by which thousands of Afghanis were brought to the United States was not secure by any means. Those individuals that were brought to our country were not properly vetted. A lot of those people could not even be properly vetted because there really was no records keeping system in Afghanistan to say who these people were, what their backgrounds were. A lot of those people were brought to Pennsylvania. A lot of those people were brought to Allegheny County, unvetted Afghan migrants and refugees. And I saw the photos of those people coming over here. A lot of those planes were filled with, young men that could potentially, if they're not properly vetted, cause problems economically, criminogenically. But our leadership here in Western PA and in Pittsburgh, Mayor Peduto at the time, they welcomed these people in, unvetted immigrants, migrants, with open arms. And it is a problem, it is a concern, and it is something that should not be happening in Pennsylvania. With respect to the schools, I think that's where school choice becomes very important, because you're right. There are, especially in the public schools, there are students of all varying degrees of where they're at academically, especially in the younger grades. And the kids that are more on the gifted side, that they are struggling because there are, like you said, students that don't speak English, and the teachers are having to spend a lot of time getting those students, giving them special attention and bringing them up to speed. And there's really not an opportunity for the students that are on the more gifted side to learn in those environments. If we had a strong school choice system where the parents of those students could say, okay, maybe this particular school, this public school where we live, isn't the best fit for my child. I'm going to take my vouchers, I'm going to take my tax dollars, and I'm going to put my child into this learning environment that's better suited for him or for her. And so, like I said, it is a complicated question. The immigration component plays a part of it. But I think with respect to the schools, at least, school choice could do a lot to offset that. But we should be strengthening our borders here in Pennsylvania, just from a self-preservation standpoint, if nothing else.
Voting in Pennsylvania, Jake, how would, we have Act 77 right now. How would you change where we are today with regards to voting?
Yeah, and I don't think there's really a way to sugarcoat it at this point. I think Act 77 was a disaster. And it was pushed by the Republican leadership in Pennsylvania, and virtually all the Republicans in Congress supported it, and it was a mistake. I don't think there's really a way to get around stating that in its simplest terms. It was a mistake. It was a failure on behalf of GOP leadership in Pennsylvania. I do believe that the elimination of straight party voting, which is something that the Republicans really wanted, is a good thing for our party and is a good thing for democracy in Pennsylvania, but really not at the expense as to what we've lost in exchange for that through Act 77. This no excuse mail-in voting has been a disaster. It has been completely opened up to avenues of fraud and misuse by the Democrats. And these ballot drop boxes, those just serve every opportunity in the world to be exploited. And the Democrats have traditionally been the party to exploit voting loopholes, if you want to call it that. So if I was elected to state Senate, I would certainly be moving to repeal Act 77. I would be seeking to implement strong voter photo identification in order to vote. I don't see any legitimate reason as to why, with all the things that you need to show photo ID to do in today's day and age, why you shouldn't have to show a valid photo ID to cast a ballot to show that our elections are safe and secure. So I would strongly support that. And, one more thing is these Dominion voting machines, I don't like them. I mean, I know they're not used everywhere in Pennsylvania, but there seems to be a lot of questions, a lot of concerns nationwide as to these Dominion voting machines, and I think they need to go. Regardless as to whether there was any shady business with them in the 2020 election, I think that the distrust is there. So we can't have free and fair elections if we don't have faith and trust in our elections. And I think that the trust of the Pennsylvania people in these machines is gone. And if we need to go back to paper ballot voting, for a few years, and at least until we figure something out that's more secure, something that can be trusted, then so be it. Because I think more than anything else, we need to have trust and faith in our elections in order for democracy to fulfill its expectation.
Can you describe to us your vision for Pennsylvania? And if you could implement all your policies, what would life in PA look like?
My vision for the future of Pennsylvania would be a state where our freedoms, our liberties are protected above all else, where a person isn't going to be fired, they're not going to lose their job for refusing to take an experimental vaccine. That shouldn't be allowed to happen in a free and fair democracy. Pennsylvania should be a state where parents don't have to worry about being investigated by the FBI because they decided to speak up on behalf of their children at a school board meeting. Pennsylvania should be a blue-collar state, a state where the middle class is able to flourish, where the family unit forms the nucleus of society, and kids are being taught the values of hard work and the principles that our nation was founded upon. And they're not being taught about 50 different genders or how they should only accomplish things in life and in society based on the color of their skin. That should not be taught in Pennsylvania. We need to work to eliminate the bureaucracy, as I've said before, so that business can flourish in Pennsylvania and we can again become a destination state and not a state that people seek to flee.
Well, thank you, everybody, for watching this interview. Since we all come in remote, it's a little bit rough on the signals, but we appreciate your patience, and hopefully you will get a better understanding of this particular candidate. May 17th is the primary. Go out and vote for your party candidate and for your favorite candidate. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jake.